Got a hot one for you today. Reviewing the Formula XD as well as the AXIA limbs from Hoyt. Got my hands on a good looking setup here, and I'm going to give you my initial thoughts, feedback, and impressions and shoot a few arrows out of this bad boy and let you know how it feels, as well as what I think about the quality, the finish, and overall just my opinions on what I think about this setup. So this one's been asked for a lot in the comment section below, obviously, because it's a new, latest, greatest, fastest, bestest, smartest, whatever you want to call it, from Hoyt, of course, each year. So I finally have my hands on the new pieces of equipment here. The Formula XD riser, which is a 25-inch Formula riser, which does not look very Formula first glance, obviously. Maybe not obvious to you, but obvious to me because I'm used to that curved section from the limb bolt back around to the limb pivot area because it always has looked like that. But this year it looks like just a standard ILF riser from the side. You wouldn't really even know unless you know how far down the limb bolt is on a standard Formula bow compared to an ILF. So it's definitely a little different, and the geometry is a little different as well. Not sure how different yet. I will be measuring that and data logging it so that way I have it in my my toolbox, so I can give that to you guys here in a little bit as to what I see that the actual difference is between this bow and the Formula XI. So I'm going to set the AXIA limb behind me, and we're going to take a look at the riser here first. First, I'm going to look at it, give you some initial impressions based on the look of it, the fit and finish, and the overall ins and outs of the riser, and then we'll discuss a little bit more technically as to what's going on here and why Hoyt says it's the newest, latest, greatest thing out there. So basically, it's a standard aluminum riser from Hoyt. However, this year I believe it's Cerakoted, and it sure looks really, really good. I don't know the name of this color. It's some sort of black, and it has almost a little bit of a metallic sheen to it. But when I look at this riser and I look for any imperfections anywhere at all, no tooling marks, no weird passes anywhere, even in the deep recesses of the riser where usually companies can get away with a lot and, you know, kind of hide things out of view, there's nothing there to even be seen. I'm going to pull out the limb pocket damper, which we will look at a little bit more, and just check in there too. And there's really nothing at all off in the bow. If you look inside the pocket, it's a little ghosty, meaning they didn't really Cerakote that area all that well. But it's not important because it's not a high view area, but the machining is perfect, which is really nice to see. One of the features that I just pulled out are limb dampeners or limb pocket dampers. You can see here in the riser, it sits inside the pocket itself, and it's a piece of aluminum that's inside of a very similar looking damper that we've seen on other bows out there for decades these days. Pretty dang similar to the Matthews harmonic dampener that they put in all their bows, which also is available on the Win-Win Meta DX. I think it is clearly a popular damper design, damper design, and it works. It is interesting that the weight is only aluminum. I don't know if it comes in steel or you can add it to be, add steel ones to make it a little heavier. Not quite sure, and it definitely fits in there pretty snugly, but it is not coming out. So it just sits up there inside the pocket and can move to remove a lot of vibration, hopefully. Also, you'll see inside the pocket, there's a spot right there with a hole in it where you can put a extra weight. There's actually 2 ounces of added weight here. The reason being is apparently compared to a standard Formula bow, if you balance it like this on the pivot point, 2 ounces in that bottom pocket makes it about the same as every other bow on the market, because one of those features that is different on this bow is a lowered grip on the actual riser itself, which is supposed to basically give you a little bit more stability in the shot, which may end up in a better, steadier sight picture. I messed with this actually a little bit over the years and designed a grip with a lowered pivot point here. You can see how this one is further spaced down compared to this one, which is the same principal idea to lower the pivot point. I liked it personally. I'm not entirely sure if everybody will, but essentially What it does is, due to lowering your grip on the riser, it'll allow you to add a lot more stabilizer weight on a long rod and still have a good sight picture. More weight on that long rod gives you more stability because it's really effective at holding the bow more still. Like walking down a tightrope, and you have the tightrope walkers, they hold a pole that's really, really long with weights on the ends to slow down their movement and stabilize them. Same principle here. Forgive the weird format of this. I'm so scattered that I forgot to take one critical measurement, and that is the actual geometry measurement of this riser, meaning how much deflex or reflex it has. Of course it has deflex. And so what I'm doing now is showing you a very crude, rudimentary, actual raw data of what I've pulled off of two different risers that Hoyt has, the Formula XI and the Formula XD. So these numbers represent the actual measurements of the two different risers. So basically the numbers are representing Y on a graph, the top to bottom, height-wise of a riser. Meaning if you were to look at the riser from this way only and just measure from a specific point up or specific point down to various different parts on the riser. And so what I use here as a 0 is the actual center of the plunger button itself. So you'll see, if I just explain to you the Formula XD, from the center of the plunger hole up to the upper limb pocket, where the limb pivots on up here, it is 11.2188 inches. And from the center of the plunger down, you'll see it as a negative number. It is negative 13.6875 inches. That's from the plunger now, not from the grip, but from the plunger. Basically what I'm trying to do here is give you apples to apples comparisons of the actual riser itself, using the rest, not the rest, but the plunger hole as the 00 reference. So basically what you can see is there's a definite difference between the Formula XI and the Formula XD. The Formula XD has a longer upper pocket, technically, from the plunger hole to the upper pocket pivot, where the limb actually pivots on, kind of near the dovetail, essentially. Which is expected, because if the grip on the XD is lowered, the rest should probably follow that. So that is true. It did happen to lower the rest as well, and you can see that the rest did lower from the XI to the XD just over 1/4 of an inch, 0.2813 inches, or roughly 7.1 millimeters. Now that's how far down the rest moved relative to the upper pocket. Now the bottom pocket, you'll see that the Formula XI was 14.0625 inches below, and the XD was 13.6875 inches below. So the XD's measurement from the plunger hole down to the bottom limb pocket is shorter by 0.375 inches, or 9.5 millimeters. So the bow did not necessarily stay symmetrical. The actual geometry itself changed by over 2 millimeters from top to bottom when talking about the relative move of the plunger hole. I know this is kind of getting very technical, but I don't want to just simplify the information too much. I want to give you the actual data here. So you'll see that on average, between the top and bottom pocket, it moved down about 315 thousandths of an inch, or roughly 8-ish millimeters. That's how much the actual arrow locator, the plunger hole, has moved down on the bow. Now if you look down at RC, which is rest clearance, that's from the center of the plunger hole to the top of the shelf. You can see that that actually has grown on the Formula XD, and it has gotten slightly bigger by 0.053 inches, or 1.3 millimeters. And actually, when I measured from the center of the plunger hole to the center of the pivot point, that also grew by 1.3 millimeters, or by 0.05 inches. So not only did the actual grip move down relative to the pockets, it did also slightly move down relative to the center of the plunger hole. So what I'm seeing is that the actual pivot point of the grip relative to the two limb pockets where they pivot, where the limbs sit on and rock, in the performance setting, of course, it actually has lowered the grip, relatively speaking, somewhere in the neighborhood between 8 and 9 millimeters, or roughly 3/8 of an inch, give or take. It's a fair amount of difference that it has lowered the pivot point of the grip on the actual bow in space. So I know I'm grabbing the Meta DX here. I've already given the Formula XD back, and after I've spent some time, after I finished up my review, I crunched the data, crunched the numbers, and am giving you the actual feedback here of what I've seen. And the actual grip relative to the pockets, if they stayed still, shifted down roughly 3/8 of an inch in total. So overall, with the riser, just looking at it, it's one of, if not the best, really finished Hoyt I've ever seen. The finishing is very nice. It's very even. The radiuses are even on both sides. I see no tooling marks, no blemishes that are visible outside of underneath where the weight would be stacked and the dampeners. And, you know, there's something new this year as well. In the limb rocker pocket here, there's that brass chunk that the dovetail engages and snaps into. And it's supposed to quiet the bow down a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see over the years what people think of that, because brass is a softer material, so it should wear, and especially when a stainless steel dovetail is jammed in against it. Supposedly that's a replaceable piece, obviously, because there's holes there. You can rebolt a new piece into it, but I have no idea how, I don't know, how long that'll last. Before I take a look at the limb, I always like to see the fitment in the riser itself and see how snug it is. I've got the bottom limb here and the riser. So I like to take the limb and turn it around backwards so the dovetail doesn't engage. So that way I can see how tight the fitment is on the limb bolt, or lack thereof, and get an idea of some fit and finish tolerances. And this bottom limb is quite loose and will fall completely out of the riser on its own. So I don't really like that. I wish that fitment was much snugger. Is that a word? I don't know. Who cares? I wish it was a lot more snug, because to me what that shows is there's just a room for play, room for movements affecting limb alignment, accuracy, things like that. Now I'll take the top limb and do the same thing. Maybe it's a fluke on the bottom. Not a fluke. It falls right out. I mean, it's pretty dang loose. Just giving you guys my honest feedback here to see what I can spot. I'm not going to do a full-blown review of this bow. It's not my bow. Actually, I have Eric to thank, who is letting me check this thing out. The reason being that I'm not giving a full-blown review is because this isn't my bow and not my set of limbs that I almost dropped. Big thanks to Eric for letting me use this setup here for a video and give a quick initial impressions recording here and a little bit of feedback after I shoot it some. So now we'll move on to the AXIA limbs themselves. Supposedly they are resin-infused core. Don't know what that means. I'm just in the dark as much as you guys are. However, looking at the actual core material, and no, it is not a bamboo core. It looks to be back to hard rock maple. What I'm doing right now is I have a set of Velos limbs here. And if I set them side by side, you can see a definitive difference in color compared to the Velos. So if you look here, you'll see the Velos are on top and the Axias are on the bottom. So you can see there's a definitive difference in the grain itself. And it really appears like, I guess, it's hard rock maple. Something interesting to note is the limb profile, the curves, look to be basically identical. Yep, the curves are identical, so they're using the same presses. So this is something that is glaringly different. Velos on top, Axia on the bottom. You'll see that the core on the Velos splits around the wedge, whereas the core on the Axia just sit on top of the wedge and go flat straight across. So there's definitely some sort of difference there between the two. Don't know why. Just giving you my feedback, showing you what it is. Quick torsional stability test. I'm going to twist them and see. These are the Grand Prix Velos XLs. So technically it is a formula limb, just without the formula dovetail area drilled in. So these limbs are the exact same length. And the Velos by hand, super stiff, as we all know. That Axia by hand, definitely a little weaker. They are 2 pounds, nope, same weight, 44 pounds. Long formula XL ILF. The Velos are basically rigid. The Axia is so close. Honestly, by hand, I can barely, if at all, tell the difference. So these Axia are very, very similar to the Velos as far as torsional rigidity is concerned. Very, very stiff limbs, the Velos. So the Axia are no different than that. I just don't have my jig or the ability to set these up because these are formula, and all of the limbs that I've measured torsional stability on were ILF limbs, so I can't do that with this limb. These limbs have been shot a little bit already. Eric set these up and shot these, not a ton, but from the factory he removed from the fork here on where that wear mark is. They come with these little plastic dots that are just taped on, and they move. So he took them off and has been shooting without them. I would have done the same, because I find as you're adjusting limb weight and things like that, they move over time and eventually fall off. And that thickness is not there to sit under the limb bolt, so it may affect alignment over time. So I just rip them right off and throw them out. And that's what Eric did. So you can see, especially because the limb is painted white here, you'll see some wear there on the forks of the limb. That is pretty much normal. Not really anything more than I would expect, and not any less than I would expect either. So, the limbs themselves are basically the same, extremely thin and narrow through this area of the limb itself. These are matte finish, which are really, really sharp. I always prefer the matte over the gloss. And the quality of the limb, just looking at it, is not all that bad. Like the finish looks amazing. The graphics look amazing. I like the black hardware, just really nice. As far as in the limb itself, when I look at it and I check it out, I don't see any imperfections with the exception of a very few small areas. These are not brand new limbs, they've been shot. So there is one thing that I did see right away once he handed me the bow strung up that is very difficult to see when the bow is unstrung. It's a lot more apparent here on the bottom limbs unstrung than the tops, but the top does have it. And it's something to just be aware of, because I'm a little concerned with it. This could be just a defect. I am not entirely certain. So, take this possibly with a grain of salt. So full disclosure, I want to give you a little bit of information before I show you what I'm really unhappy about with this riser and limb setup. It took me some time to get a hold of Doug and discuss with him what was going on, and also hear feedback from the customer, meaning the person who lent me the bow. And essentially, long story short, these limbs are going to be warrantied by Hoyt. So Doug's not sure. Doug Denton, being the engineer at Hoyt that works on the recurve division, he, after I discussed with him what I saw with the limbs, preliminarily at least, he said that he wasn't sure if they were within spec or not based on quality control that they set as it leaves the factory. But once I described to him that I could see some issues were actually going on within the limb, specifically the limb tip, as you're about to see, he definitely said, yeah, that doesn't sound about right, and they probably should be warrantied. And then once I discussed with him some of the other issues that I was seeing in regards to the actual graphics and the clicking sound that you will hear here in a second. But once I showed him what I was seeing in the actual graphics of how it's mounted to the actual backside of the limb, and described to him the sounds I was hearing as I was pulling the bow back and stringing the limbs, he then said, oh yeah, absolutely, we'll just warranty those limbs. So like I've said before on this channel, I'm all about openness and honesty, and I don't want to lie to you. I'm not going to tell you that these limbs were perfect when they're not, but I will tell you that Hoyt did take care of their customer, the person who lent me this bow, and said, you know what, we'll just warranty the limbs, we'll send you a new set when we have them made. So unfortunately, he has to wait a few weeks to get the replacement set of limbs, but at least Hoyt's doing something good on their part by warrantying a defective set of limbs. But if you look at the limb right here under the Y and T, right through that area, you'll see a lot of like white specks and flecks on the finish there. See, yeah, right through there. So it's on this side of the actual carbon, it's between the carbon and the graphic. It's really hard to see. Right through there. So it's on both sides of the limb in the exact same spot. It happens to be right where the wedge ends, and it's on both limbs. Why I saw this and why I was concerned was it looked like there was a bit of a gap in there. Like the bond didn't really happen. Or due to the riser flexing, the limb flexing in that area potentially made it fracture and fatigue. I don't know, and I have no idea. But there is something that we need to discuss when I string up the bow, and it's something to pay attention to, especially if you have a set on your own. I definitely would be giving Hoyt a call. I'm sad to report that it just is something that they may need to address. The actual tips, they look good. Nothing really different between these and the Velos that I can tell by first glance. Actually, they're maybe they're thinner, they're smaller, and they're shorter. The string groove is the same. They're definitely different. So if you look, AXIA's on this side, Velos on that side. The limb tips, there. That's the Velos. It's longer on this section. It sticks up further, and the grooves are deeper cut, or the limb is narrower. I think the limb's actually narrower here on the AXIA compared to the Velos in this area there. So they've removed some mass weight from the limb tip area. Full disclosure, because this bow was handed to me strung, I looked at the limb tips and I was like, whew, wow, those are looking like they're potentially not even in the groove, and on further inspection they were. So they've changed the geometry and the shape here a little bit, made them a little more narrow, and it's very, very, very narrow to say the least. Now before I get too far into this, I'm going to string the riser up, get everything all set up, and have the fastest setup on this channel yet, because it was already set up, and I already aligned the limbs at the archery range because I was giving some lessons to him, and he wanted them checked out, so I worked my magic and made them nice and lined up as they should be. They snap in and out really, really easily, mostly because the fitment of the limb fork on the limb bolt's not super snug. So let me get this bad boy strung up. I don't know if you heard that, but that is the concern I have. Hopefully you can hear that. Now that cracking, I don't know if you heard it, doesn't happen every single time, but it does happen the majority of the time that I go to string the bow. Yep, happened again. And so when I go like this, the limb tip's so narrow that the serving sticks out past the sides of the limbs. It's kind of shocking, to say the least, because it makes me feel uneasy, but it's in the groove and it's not coming out. But you can see how the serving sticks out wider than the limb. There's a lot of material removed here, and Ukas are more scary than this, so I'll give Hoyt a pass on that. My joints are cracking. That's my joints. Earlier at the range, when I was drawing it back with Eric around, check it out. See if the bottom will do it. Like I said, I'm not sure if you can hear that. I can hear like some creaking going on. I'm concerned because, again, same place. Down in the bottom. I'll turn it this way, maybe the light will be better. It looks like there's separation happening. Yeah, that doesn't look right to me. It's something that sometimes the finish is a little off and there might be a bubble there, but it genuinely looks like it's between the graphics layer and the carbon layer. I really doubt it will do anything. I don't think there's any sort of structure or anything really at all that this graphic does that's on the backside. There is obviously some carbon there, but I don't know how deep down that is. I don't know what the layup of the limb is. I don't know how the graphics are put on. I don't know any of those things. I don't pretend to know. All I know is looking at that, it concerns me, and it concerns me even more than it went click, click, click when I went to string it, and it click, click, clicks as I pull it back. I don't know. I'm just the messenger. Yeah, I wish I could say something else. I'm really not sure. Now, Another thing, full disclosure, I don't think these limbs are, well, I can say from firsthand experience, these limbs are not what normally I would see out of the factory from Hoyt as of late, as of like the last 5 years. Previous to that, I'd say maybe something different, but I looked at this bow and Eric immediately when he handed it to me had concerns of the limbs being straight or not. And after really close inspection, I took a picture taking the bow, setting it like this, holding it and looking down the string, looking down the limbs, and it gives you a good idea as to if the limbs are straight or not. So what I do is you look, and I've actually created a video on how to straighten your limb tips and how to verify things. I'll have links in the description below and a card at the top up there. So you can check it out because it shows you how I'm doing this. And I basically put the limb down, I line up the serving and the serving, and look and see where the limb tip falls. And this top limb is definitely off to the left side, so off to the sight window side of the bow. Because of that, I said, hey, let me check your bow's alignment. We put some biter blocks on it, and I aligned everything, and it's still just as bad. Can I shim this with the limb rockers? Yes. Would I get enough of a result to straighten this out enough? I don't think so, only because if you look extremely close at the limb tips, you'll see that the string actually comes off slightly different from each side to the next. This side, your left, sticks out further from the limb. You can see, I don't know if you can see it, but I took some pictures, and actually, if I show you the limb itself unstrung, it is actually asymmetrical. So I think there was a machine issue here that they machined the riser or the limb tips incorrectly. Right through that area, there's a definitive bump that's different, and on that other side, it's actually cut a little bit off. So I think it's safe to say that based on Hoyt's quality as of recently, this would be probably considered a second defect or something that's warrantyable. This side is a little bit different than this side, and that's causing the limb to twist or look twisted. So it's not necessarily actually fully blown twisted, but it definitely is not, it's not what I would hope to see for, definitely, if I was a consumer and I bought this, I would not be happy. I'd be calling Hoyt, and I think Eric will be doing that to try to get these warrantied or swapped out. I'm sure Hoyt will take care of them. They're usually good about that kind of thing, especially when it's something quite obvious as far as how off it is, especially when this bow has been set up and aligned, and it should be dead set, but it's just not. So, before I shoot the bow and get a draw force curve on it for you guys to see, actually I'll just run the draw force curve now and show you the data and show you how these limbs actually react. Now what I will do also is I will overlay Velos limbs of the same length on a Formula XI so you can see the difference between the two. Now please note that those limbs were set up on different risers and tuned totally different, and it's not the same setup that I normally do when I compare apples to apples when I'm comparing limb draw force curves. So take that with a grain of salt as well, but you can see and check out the draw force curve data and make your own inference as to what the differences are between the two sets of limbs. I haven't seen the data because I haven't run the curves yet, but just speaking from a raw guess, looking at the curve of the limb, it's probably going to be very, very similar to the Velos itself. So what I'm going to do before I go out and shoot this bad boy, I'm going to swap in some limb bolts, some super ultra custom Kaminski high precision, high tolerance, fancy dancy limb bolts that are made out of stainless steel, perfectly machined to fit this Hoyt riser. No mistake in that. These are going to be coming out extremely soon, and I am very, very, very excited about this because there are some reasons that I like shooting stainless steel limb bolts. The original ones are made out of aluminum. These ones are made out of stainless and machined with extremely high tolerances, and they have some awesome markings on them that will allow you to track what your tune is and setup and be able to, yeah, just have a little different option in the actual bow. So those will be really handy when it comes to making limb weight adjustments, because there will be absolutely no guessing as to how far you've turned your limb bolts, because you can just look at the clocking mechanism on there and turn it whatever amount you want and do equal amounts top and bottom. So it solves a lot of problems that people have had in the past. So now that those are locked in with these 375 limb bolts, not the 380s, so it's not the oversized limb bolts. Check my fitment. It's tighter. Maybe I'll go to the 380s. Yeah, because they hang in longer, but they're still not tight enough. So these are 380s, 380 thousandths of an inch, as opposed to the other ones are 375s. All right, so now we'll check our fitment. That's nice and snug now. It ain't coming out when you don't want it to, and it'll hold its alignment better. Plus they're made out of stainless, so a little bit of extra weight in the riser. And I'm also going to put one of my grips on from Arcor. I'm going to put the recurve grip on it in plastic. Not the LPP, but the regular recurve grip. If you're interested in grabbing one of my own Arcor grips, I'll have links in the description below for you to grab those. And if you use code Kaminski at checkout, you'll get 10% off of any of their products. Not just my grips, but any grip out there that they have. Anything available on their website. Yeah, it's pink and it's got some flair, but it's my own grip and it'll feel really good, so I can give you guys some good feedback on what I think about this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to build this bow up with just putting some accessories on it, go outside and shoot a few arrows and tell you what I think about how it feels. Because what it feels like is supposed to be very different. According to Eric, very dead in the hand, very little vibration, and it's supposed to feel really, really good. So I'm excited about that, and I'm gonna go take you outside now and let you know. Okay, we're out here with the Formula XD and AXIA limbs here from Hoyt, and I'm gonna shoot my first shots out of it. I'm not gonna tune this bow because it's already set up for the person who is allowing me to do this video. So I'm not going to be adjusting or setting up or changing any of that kind of stuff. I did align the limbs as best as I could despite the limb tip issue, so it should feel quite good. I'm just not going to tune it because, like I said, it's not my bow. It feels interesting. Like the first feeling I had drawing the bow back, I think I can feel the grip being lower. Like, what it feels like is exactly what it is. It feels like I'm pulling the bow back like this because the grip is so low on the bow. I don't know what the tiller split is, and I don't know if I would need a different tiller split than normal. I suspect it's a potential likelihood in order to feel the same type of feeling and balance on my fingers. But it feels pretty good. It feels stable. Personally, I like that balance. Now, as far as the aftershot, the reaction part, for how surprised I was when I shot the Hoyt XD when I reviewed that for the first time and how refined it felt as far as little residual vibration, I think this may have less residual vibration. Obviously, there's dampeners in the limb pockets, so that's going to take out quite a bit. But the limbs, they don't feel like a standard Hoyt, and they don't sound like a standard Hoyt. They're a little louder than normal ILF bows, meaning all the others besides Hoyt, but they don't sound like a Hoyt. They sound more like all of the other ones out on the market. More of what I would expect, at least, and hope, out of a very high quality, top priced limb. It jumps really hard out of the hand, especially when I'm pushing with a decent amount of pressure in the pressure point where I want the arrow to go. It feels really good. I can feel the string hitting my arm a little bit harder than I normally would. Maybe it's due to the limb issue. But it feels very dead. Not much in the way of limb flopping at all. It jumps really hard. It really has a very pleasant reaction to it. It's not like a typical Hoyt. It is definitely more refined than your standard Hoyt. I don't know if it's better than the Exceed. The limb reaction is definitely better than the Exceed for sure. I don't know how much of that is the limb dampeners or not. I could take them out and shoot a couple arrows and see what happens. It's just really, really dead in the hand. So I don't know if the engineering or if it's the dampeners, but I'm going to pull those out and we'll find out if the dampers make a difference as to how much reaction I feel after the shot. Due to the limb tips being so thin, I would probably have my string builder, or if I was building strings, make the top loop a little bit smaller than your standard recurve loop, just so it seems less scary on the limb tip. Definitely can feel a little bit more vibration. Definitely feel a little difference. I wouldn't say a huge difference, actually. All I feel is more, I guess, broad spectrum frequency, not necessarily a whole lot of limb reaction. Still jumps nice and hard. I think just overall, it lowers the amount of overall vibration. These limbs are the best feeling Hoyt limbs I've felt as far as after-shot reaction is concerned. Like I said, quite refined, very little residual vibration and very little residual just overall movement of the whole system. I really like it. I really, really like it. I think Hoyt's done a good job. Doug's done a good job. I like the feel of the bow a lot. Now my overall initial thoughts on this is I like it a lot. If I was wanting to get into a high performance bow and I wanted to go with the formula system, I'd absolutely pick this bow. Obviously, all the others are now discontinued, so you don't really have a choice. That's kind of how it goes each year. But it's definitely the best feeling formula bow I've ever shot. Pretty much no residual vibration, even without the limb dampeners in the pocket. It is very, very refined, very clean, and it jumps really, really hard. It still draws nice and smooth, just like the Velos did. Overall, I like the feel of the bow itself. The lowered grip is a little bit something to get used to. I think I would have to adjust some stabilizer balance or some tiller, potentially knocking point. All those kinds of things will need to be adjusted because the overall geometry of the riser has changed as far as the placement of the grip vertically on the bow itself. I think as far as the change of not having the typical formula limb pocket with like the big shoehorn looking thing on the end of it, I like the look of it. It looks good. The finish on the riser is really phenomenal. I couldn't be happier with the finish on the riser. I wish the fit of the limb bolts and the limb interface were a little tighter. The tolerances are a little off, and it's just not what I would really hope to see in such a high-end bow. I actually put my oversized limb bolts on this that I'm coming out with very soon. Sign up for the mailing list on my website, jkaminski.com, because that is coming out very, very soon. I'm going to guess within the next 2 weeks, everything will be coming out and launching for the limb bolts. Now, as far as the limb quality and what I saw with the actual twist of the limb and the decal separating potentially, I don't know if it actually is, but it looks like it is. I think it just comes down to a quality control issue. It's something that probably will be addressed under warranty, and it'll probably just get swapped out for another set of limbs. So if you've got something similar going on, I'm sure they'll take care of you, your rep or Hoyt itself. And I'm not entirely convinced what's going on. Clearly, I can see that the limb tip is not cut correctly, meaning it's not symmetrical left or right, and that's causing the limb to be twisted and pulled one direction. Could have been a simple error, and it definitely slipped through quality control. I've not taken a closer look, or as close of a look on another set of AXIA limbs. I did coach somebody that had some not that long ago, but I didn't see this issue, and their limbs fit in their riser much better. So again, I think it's quality control. That's what it probably comes down to. The riser is an absolute win, and the limbs, if they can get that quality control down, I'd really, really like them. I hope that's all it is, because, like I said, they launch out of the hand and it feels very refined. By far and above the best feeling Hoyt I've shot, for sure.